All right, great. So listen, I'm going to answer any questions that you've got towards the end of this. But if you have a question that you're not comfortable asking me, verbally or in the chat, you can also send it to me on Twitter. Just use the @Bedford Agency, and I'll see it on my phone, and I'll answer it that way. So whatever way is the easiest for you guys to ask me questions tonight, feel free to leverage the chat. You can ask me it verbally, or you can send it to me on Twitter tonight, and I'll do my best to answer all those questions. Again, I'm Brian Bedford, CEO of the Bedford Agency, and we've been at this for a few years trying to help families go through the college recruiting process. And so tonight we're going to cover really a couple of things. I'm going to give you a little bit of my background, not to bore you with that, because there's certainly much more exciting topics in my bio, but I do think it helps give some context. We'll talk about the probability of recruiting and kind of what that looks like, and give you a kind of a reality checkpoint on that. Third, we'll work through how to attack the recruiting problem, and we'll give you some suggestions on what that looks like. And then finally, I'll give you a little bit about what I do as an advisor and kind of how that works, and then I'll answer your Q&A. Then hopefully I'll make fun of Todd or Brian or Emma or somebody along the way. All right, so a little bit about me, guys. I'm a 22-year vet in the sports and tech space. Was director of recruiting at TCU in Fort Worth for all of you DFW folks that are on the call. I also was a Division II recruiting director. I helped build out a whole recruiting portfolio when I was at Exos Digital, and founded this company in 2016. Really, it was just, I'll tell a funny story. I had helped a guy and his son go through the recruiting process, and kind of gave me a backhanded compliment that said, "Hey, Brian, I know you, and I know all the good, bad, and ugly with you, and I still would have paid you to help me." That's how much we learned from going through it. And originally, I didn't have like any big business plan or any big process. It was really just, I just want to help some families, want to help some kids, and I saw some people getting taken advantage of, and I saw some unsuccessful bouts through the recruiting process, and I just realized, man, I'm sitting on a bank of knowledge here that I think I can help some other people with. And so that's just where it started. It literally was as genuine as that, guys. And so over the last 4 years, it's just kind of plodded along. I will be honest with you, the last 3 years, have a half a dozen kids or so, and it was great and working with them. But I will tell you, since in 2020, it's just exploded. We literally have families from all over the country in a number of sports now, and just the uneasiness right now with some kids are not being able to play their fall sports season, or they missed the spring season, or weren't able to go to a camp, or unsure what the dead period extension means, and so on and so forth. It's been unbelievable, the amount of questions that are coming in right now. So if we can help put some hearts and minds at ease, then we've accomplished something here. And so hopefully you'll get a sense of that through tonight's session. But enough about me. Let's get into the main meat of this, and let's talk about the probability of playing sports. So all of you guys are here either as a parent or a student athlete. You're here to really try to understand, how to get recruited and what are the tips and tricks. But I always want to start with, what's the reality really look like? So I'm simply sharing some statistics for you, not to scare you, not to overwhelm you, but simply to be realistic about recruiting and what does it take and what does it look like, and all that kind of stuff. So the reality is that the probability is between 5 to 8% of getting a scholarship, depending on the sport that you play. I did a poll to see what sports we had, and you can tell that I didn't have anybody that was a female ice hockey player, because that's your best probability. Now, Todd, I don't know if you guys are having more kids, but if you're going to, hockey's the way to go, right? So just to give you guys a heads up there in your family. But the reality is that the odds are not super positive. They're just, if I'm just being realistic. Now, the reality is that there's actually some missing components to this data, because this is only the NCAA. This does not include junior college athletics, does not include the NAI. So the numbers bump up a little bit because you've got some more, and I'll show you some examples of where that gets really interesting and creative. But the reality is that, you know, you've got a hill to climb when we're thinking about this. And so to overcome that, right, you've got to be really precise to kind of weave that needle through to make sure that you put yourself in the best possible situation. And that's what we're going to talk mostly about here tonight. So let's give some examples. Again, the columns on the right are just a different way of looking at kind of the odds. And again, depending on the sport that you play, the odds vary from as you look at this. This is actually more comprehensive because here now you're actually looking at NCAA and NAI schools. So as an example, women's soccer is a 40-to-1 ratio, or let's say women's tennis 48-to-1, or men's tennis 79-to-1. But when you break that down and you think about athletic scholarships, right? They all come in different sizes and shapes and flavors. Maybe we're not all, but a lot of us are used to kind of the full scholarship model that the NCAA Division I football has, like a University of Texas or University of Florida or USC or Notre Dame, and that's great, and they got 85 full scholarships for football. But the reality is, for all of the other sports, they typically work off kind of an equivalency model. And it's kind of like managing your budget at home month to month. There's only so much going around. You got to figure out how to spread it out. You don't get everything that you want month to month, and you're not able to buy a new car month to month, so you have to make some decisions. Well, these coaches have to do some of these things. So I'm showing some examples here. So if you think about women's soccer Division I, they have 14 full scholarships. Of Division II, they have 9.9. Men's basketball, you got 9 scholarships, men's basketball, 9 in Division II, 12 in the NAI. A lot of people think the NAI has less scholarships. Well, not always. There are uniquenesses to each and every sport as you go through this. So it's just important, right, as you think about this is the opportunity in front of you. And I always try to lay it out because I think it's really important to understand what are you trying to get to, what are the obstacles that you've got to, overcome. And then you start to build the game plan on how do I go attack that? How do I go do things that separate myself to put myself in the best possible position that I could be in? And again, I'm speaking very generally right now because we've got lots of different people that come from different aspects or representing different sports or multi-sport and boys and girls. And so I'm kind of painting a broad brush on this. So that allows us to transition into how do we really attack this problem? So as we think about attacking this problem, and maybe problem's not the right word, but how do we reach the full potential to capitalize on getting an athletic scholarship? I try to break it down into kind of 6 big areas. And so you guys might take these 6 down because I'm going to cover each of these in detail here, or try to cover them in some level of detail tonight. And again, I won't be able to go through each of these in too great a detail, but I've got a slide on each one of these. But academics and character kind of go hand in hand. Your evaluation, where can you play? Not everybody can play at every level of the sport they play. Your ability to get educated on the process of recruiting, communication and social media, the use of technology, and then really how do you perform optimally when the lights are on, when the bright lights are on, or when you're at a camp or you're at a showcase or whatever. Like, your performance is a big piece of this, right? Obviously, that's like kind of a no-brainer for today. So let's dive into that. So academics and character. Number one, let's talk about the academic element. So number one is, at minimum, you got to have 16 core classes. You got to have a minimum of 2.3 and or a sum of 75 on your ACT. So it works as a bit of a sliding scale. So the higher your grades are, the lower your test score can be. or vice versa. The higher your test score can be, the lower your GPA is. Now, my guess is probably for 85% of the people that are on this call, because you've taken the time out to invest in being here, you probably got pretty decent grades. I would bet that everybody on this call, if I was a betting man, I'd put $50 that says every kid on here has probably got a 3.0 or better. So kudos to every one of you. But that's fine, and that's a good, starting point. But my recommendation would be, as you think about this, I always tell the families that I work with is you need to aim anywhere as close to 4.0 or anywhere close to above 3.5, and try to shoot for a 25 ACT. And you might say, well, why, Brian? Because that is way above the minimum standards that are needed for eligibility. Well, because in most cases, you're going to play if we talk about baseball, tennis, soccer, and any of the other, anybody other than, let's say, men's and women's basketball and football and some of the major sports, most of those scholarships are going to be partial scholarships. So you want to put yourself in a situation where you can stack academic and athletic aid together. So critical that we think about having, that academic profile under our belt. And it also opens up some net new opportunities. So I have a kid here in the state of Oklahoma, really talented junior, and he's a 2022 graduate. He has a 25 ACT and a 3.9 GPA, and that allows the Columbias, the Princetons, the Yales to start recruiting him at a very early age because he hit the minimum standard, that 25 ACT. That means the Northwesterns, the Vanderbilts and so forth, the Rices of the world, they would be interested. So I always encourage you, A, it allows you to open up some additional opportunities from a academic profile, from a school perspective, but two, it also is going to open up potentially some academic scholarships for you. So don't aim for the minimum. Make sure that you've got a game plan for standardized testing. Make sure you're taking the standardized test as early in at least your junior year as possible. If you can take it in the spring of your sophomore year, that's great too. But have a plan to where academics are front and center to what you're doing. And then have a testing plan. If you don't know, if you're not a good test taker, then, find a resource, the school or the school district, or there are independent tutors that you might have to pay a fee for. They can help you with test prep. So make sure that you're putting the time in and prepare for your academics and your standardized testing, just like you would go into that Monday night private session for soccer. Make sure you're doing the same amount of stuff on the academic side. And I'm just using that as an example because that's where a lot of people, they don't think, they're putting all their eggs in the basket of an athletic scholarship. And I would tell you is that's one egg. Make sure you're putting your eggs in all of the baskets. The second thing is character. And Tim Adcox is actually on here from Heart of a Champion, and they do character work all across the country. But if I just think about character, are you timely to practice? Are you trustworthy? Are you a good teammate? Are you a good classmate? Do you represent yourself correctly on social media or any other outlet? Character matters, and we can get into kind of the FBI investigations that some of these schools do. They actually will skim your social profiles and so forth to make sure that they can inspect the character that you have or don't have. So critically important that you put academics and character really at the top of this, okay? The next is evaluations. So listen, if I think about this in a clockwise fashion, certainly the old adage of film don't lie is certainly important. So you need to make sure that you have timely updates to your highlights, that you've got a bank of film, not only practice footage, individual footage, virtual combines, or game footage that you're putting out there. Number two, that you've got discipline and a strategy around camps, showcases, AAU games, college camps, don't need to be at everything. You can actually waste some money doing that, but you need to be strategic about where you go. The next piece is the coaches typically will either have a recruiting region, or depending on the sport, they may have a position that is going to be recruited first, and then they may have a head coach or a coordinator or a recruiting or an analyst. So you're going to have various folks that are involved in the evaluation process. You need to have a good feel for what that looks like in your sport. And then in some sports, there are actually third-party evaluators that actually will go in and do early evaluations, especially on freshmen and sophomores in certain sports where they're actually hired by the schools to provide data and analytics and a written evaluation as kind of an extension of their staff. And then the last thing that's really not on here is that if you don't understand how evaluations work in your sport, and your high school coach or your club coach doesn't really understand it, then you need to seek counsel with somebody that does understand how that works in your sport. And the last thing that I would say is that you need to, as early in the process as you can. So once you start doing, let's say, varsity athletics or travel ball or a pretty aggressive level of competition in the sport that you're playing on, you need to have a sanity check on where people project you in college. As a parent, this is really tough to do because you believe in your son and daughter, and you absolutely should be their number one advocate. But you need to seek counsel and make sure that you really have people that professionally evaluate talent, evaluate your son or daughter. Okay, and I'm going to give you an example. Your son may be, I'm going to use an example because I don't think we have any football players on here, so I'm going to use a football example. Your son may love football. He may be the greatest kid. He may have a 4.0 and a 33 ACT, but he might be 5'11" and 230 pounds and play offensive guard. Guess what? He is not playing at the University of Texas, boys and girls. Okay, he is not tall enough. He is not big enough, and nothing else will matter at that point, right? So you need to really have a good sense of how evaluations work and understand that for your sport. And if you don't, then you need to seek counsel either through a trusted advisor or your coach or whatnot. But that's critically important that you understand it. The next one, number 3, education. So guys, there is a ton of information online as we think about the recruiting calendar. Today, right now, we're in a dead period. If you didn't know, they just extended the dead period to the end of January, or excuse me, January 1, sorry. Some of you may not even know what that means. Some of you may have just been told that. You have no idea what even dead period even means. My advice to you would be there's a ton of information online at ncaa.org that you as a parent can research on your own. It literally costs you nothing. It's all available, and the sport that you play, each of them have a calendar that looks somewhat like the two that I have shared with you here. The one on the left is for baseball, and the one on the right is a football one. But every sport, I could have grabbed screenshots from every sport. They're on here. It's important for you to be educated on the process and read up on the things that are available in your sport. You should print off the recruiting calendar and the recruiting guidelines for the sport that you play. And then be realistic about, what are your options, and have you marry that education up with that evaluation and or your academics. It's going to start to narrow in down onto where you need to be focused and where you need to spend your time. Last thing is start early. I appreciate that you're all on this call tonight, and that's awesome, and that you've taken the time to do research and be part of this process, but you can never start too early putting a game plan together. And guess what? If you don't have a college fund, whatever you're spending in travel ball and in hotels, but maybe we're not really traveling a whole lot right now, but just in general, I would challenge you to put 50 cents to every dollar or 1 for 1, put that in a college account, because you're going to find that you're going to need every nickel, every dollar for your college, because most of you, there's a pretty good chance that most every one of you here that have a son or daughter that plays, there's a good chance that none of you guys will get a full ride athletic scholarship. It might happen for one or two of you, and I hope it does. But the odds say that that is not highly likely. That doesn't mean that you might not get it through a combination of scholarships, which that is great as well. But the athletic scholarships can be few and far between, and so it's important for you to save now. And if you're not, I would encourage you to do that right now. All right. Item number 4, communications. Boy, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's out there, from social media on the left to I had one of my guys get a letter in the mail yesterday from the University of Kansas. Make sure that you have an active communication plan, that you have a strategy by which that you're doing social media, that how you're engaging with email communication, how you're engaging with direct messages. Do each of the family members have access to your son or daughter's Twitter account so you can see the engagement that's happening with coaches? Do you even have a Twitter account? Are you even watching what your kids are doing online from a social perspective? Have a plan when it comes to communications, especially early on, to build your brand as a recruitable student athlete. So some of you, I'm aware of the things that you do, but just know that empowering your son or daughter with and around communications is hypercritical. These coaches don't want to hear from you. They don't want to see you posting about little Johnny or little Susie online or on Facebook. First of all, they're not even looking at Facebook, so just quit using Facebook, guys. That's not how they recruit, okay? But Twitter or Snapchat or Instagram, which is where most of this is happening, be active, but let your kids be active and build a social calendar with your kids, okay? And if you're not, you should be moving forward, okay? Number 5, technology. Let me just say this. There's a whole bunch of stuff out there. Some of it can be very, very useful. Here's what I would say. It is not the all-end, be-all, however that saying goes. It is not everything to recruiting. It's a piece of the puzzle. It will give you informed decision. Captain you can see people looking at your profile. In CSA, you can leverage their search features. Productive Recruiter, it's got a CRM built into it. And I could give you countless other examples. The reality is you can actually be really successful in recruiting without any of it. Without any of it. Email's free, YouTube's free, text messages are free, Twitter's free, Instagram's free, questionnaires on websites are free, and you going out and busting your butt as a student athlete is free the last time I checked it, okay? So you don't need any of it, to be honest with you, okay? And so my guidance to you would be careful and be smart. Some of it, if you use it and it's part of your strategy, can be super effective, not poo-pooing it in any way. All I'm simply advising you is just be smart and be careful and don't rush into that, because I've seen a lot of people that have called me and say, hey, we made this $4,500 investment and we didn't really get anything back on it. That's tough to recover from for some families. Maybe not all, but that's a pretty decent chunk of change the last time I checked. So I just want people to be really careful and really smart with that stuff. And then finally is around performance. So have a plan. Be mindful of what you're doing to seek counsel as it relates to how can you get better as an athlete. What are you doing in the off season? How are you? Which areas of the sport that you play are you working on? Again, if you're constantly going to travel, if you're just playing in games every week, with a travel team or with a full baseball team or whatnot, and you're not really working on your body, if you're not lifting weights, if you're not sprinting, if you're not conditioning, if you're not working on skill instruction to balance out just the games, and I know games are awesome. Games are so much fun. But I would tell you that, building yourself out as a well-rounded athlete is hypercritical. And I would tell you, the older you get, it really doesn't matter. For all of you guys that have student athletes that are in high school, if you're playing games during a non-evaluation period where coaches can't come see you, or now virtually come see you. It's a little different now, but in normal years, right? Let's just pretend that this is not 2020 and the recruiting calendar is actually normal. My guidance to you would be, you need to be traveling when you're in an evaluation period, when coaches can actually come see you. And when you're not in that evaluation period, you need to really think hard about, should I go travel with that team to go play that game? Should I go to that tournament? Should I go to that showcase? Or would I be better served spending 3 hours in the batting cages, or a private lesson with a goalie coach, or working on, getting stronger in the weight room, right? Or working on getting out of my stance for a 40 or a 60, or working on a 3-cone or a specific shuttle drill that they might do in my sport that I know they're going to evaluate me at the next camp. And so I'm not saying don't play games. I'm absolutely saying do it. All I'm simply saying to you is you need to be balanced, okay? Because these coaches, they've got a window of time typically when they can evaluate. Now, the rules are a little different now because they're doing a lot of virtual camps, or they're doing a lot of virtual watching film remotely, or they're logging into a secured site to watch games. That's really difficult to evaluate, right? Sometimes you can tell if you know about the guy or the girl, but if you are just hoping that you just magically get seen and they don't know about you, I had a guy, former Major League Baseball guy, Brett Carroll, runs BCA Academy in Knoxville. He said, man, if you're expecting that one college coach is going to randomly, walk by your field number 22 at the showcase with 2,000 kids there and see you magically hit the home run in that 1 3-second period of time, you're just, that's like betting on hope as a strategy. Now, maybe that happens. Maybe you just magically hit the home run when the LSU assistant coach walks by. Maybe that happens for you. But think about that in a 3-day tournament. Like all of the stars got to line up. I've got to sit on his head. Brian's got to sit on one hand and rub his belly, and I've got to juggle 4 basketballs at the same time. All at the same time to make that happen. The reality is that probably doesn't happen every week. So just be balanced when you think about performance, okay? Just make sure that you're seeking instruction. There's things that you need to do to get better, then you need to be working on that as well as working on going to the games. I know that's a difficult one because you make commitments to travel teams and so forth. So I do want to be mindful and understand it. So let me touch on one final thing. I'll give you one thing, and then I'm going to stop and answer some questions, and then I'll finish with a little bit about what we do in this space. Let me give you kind of a couple of things to kind of take away right now in the middle of COVID-19 that I want you to be thinking about. Number one is some of you guys, we got a bunch of people on here that are in the South, but I have families that they're not able to play fall sports right now this fall. And so my guidance to everybody is, listen, if you're not working out with your team in a structured environment, then you need to be working out at least 4 times a week. You need to be sprinting because that applies to every sport. And you need to be doing skill-specific instruction, hills, etc. Running and speed is the number one thing. I don't care what sport you're in, whether you play. It doesn't matter. It's a really important one, and it carries over. And speed can mean different things. Like if you're a tennis player, that can be quickness on the court and so forth. But the reality is that speed and movement is a big one. Not that being in the weight room is not awesome. I love guys that want to get under the weights and start pressing it out. But the reality is speed and explosiveness is really important. Do your planning right now on standardized tests. Have an ACT prep class. Make sure that you're thinking about when you're going to test, when you're signed up. There's a big backlog of the testing stuff because of everything that happened in the spring and the summer. They're opening up some new testing locations. They're opening up some new dates. Make sure you've got a plan on that. Even consider taking a concurrent enrollment class. Get ahead. Like if you're all virtual right now with your school, consider taking an online class, maybe as a junior or senior, to get a couple of classes under your belt as a concurrent student or whatnot. All right, get ahead in the process. It'll help lighten the load. Listen, on content and communication, if you don't have a YouTube page, get one. Bank all your video, practice footage, one-on-ones, instructional video. You know, some of you guys will use Huddle for a lot of your sports for things, but you know, if you're in the batting cage, you know, or whatnot, literally, you can have mom and dad shoot it on your iPhone, and you can make an edit with iMovie. So take advantage of that. It doesn't have to be super polished, but whether it's in the cage, whether it's, you know, if you're out there, you know, doing ball work as a soccer player or drill work as a tennis player or another sport that maybe I missed that joined late, have a bank of video on YouTube. If you're not, guess what? Your competition does. And you never know what a coach may want. They may want to see you talk in front of the camera. They may want to see how tall you are, how long you are, how big your hands are. So have a bank of video. You never know what will be advantageous for you down the road with the college coach. Have a content strategy as far as how you're going to distribute content. Again, this isn't coming from mom and dad. This needs to come from, you know, Billy and Susie. They need to be thinking about how often do they want to do that. Are you emailing your target schools? Are you making contact with them? Even if they can't contact you. So some of you guys are freshmen or have freshmen and sophomore sons or daughters. That's okay. Still email them anyways. Still fill out the questionnaire now. You want to be in the hopper right now with your target schools. And then for those of you that are a little bit later in the process, you know, you need to be thinking about talking to those coaches about virtual visits and how you can set those up right now. Hopefully this goes back to like normal when we could all visit and fellowship and meet human beings. But in the meantime, you know, consider, you know, hey coach, I'm really interested in your school. Is there a time when you're doing a Zoom call or a WebEx with to see the school, or even contact the admissions department about how they're doing virtual visits, and maybe that helps you identify some schools that you could target, and so forth. So again, there's things that you can be doing right now that you can take ownership of this process. I just encourage you guys to do this. So with that, I'm gonna stop here for now. I'll come back to a little bit about what I do and how I work with families. So I'll cover that in just a minute. But let me pause there. Most of you guys are on mute now. But what questions can I help answer? We'll take about 10 minutes of questions here, just around recruiting, do's and don'ts, tips and tricks. What are your questions that you guys have for me tonight from what you heard? And again, I just try to keep this high level, very practical, but go for it. I'll open up the floor to anybody that's on tonight. Don't be bashful.
Brian, this is Kim Bluin.
Yep.
I just have a question. You touched on it a little bit, but I want to really understand your recommendation for how much of what you're saying should be done by the parents and how much of what you're saying really needs to be done by the student athlete, because it's significant, I think, to note the difference. And I wonder kind of what your best practice is and how hard that might be.
Great question. That is a phenomenal question. So I would say this. Being a college athlete is not for everyone, and only the really special ones get an opportunity to do that. To be special, that means that you've got to do something that separates yourself from the competition. And that means it is mom and dad doing it. Like, you need to be a teacher. You need to help them stay in the bowling lanes. But your son or daughter should be doing a good chunk of what I just described to you. Now, there are things that you need to help them with, So, you know, you may need to seek the school guidance counselor out to help them with ACT prep or SAT prep. Like, that's a very appropriate spot for a parent, okay? But sending an email to a college coach or an analyst or a recruiting coordinator, please, dear God, don't do that as a parent. Okay, don't do that. No, that's pretty taboo. Like, you know, hey, little Johnny's like really awesome and you should like him. Like, don't do that. Coaches want to recruit people who are interested in them. And I don't think you're going back to college anytime soon, Kim. So let's leave that to your son or daughter to be the ones that are responsible for that. Right. So you're going to have a little bit of you may have to have, I don't know your situation, forgive me, but, you know, some parents may have to have a little tough love conversation. What I always tell them is, like, listen, when you're entering in this, you got to be really serious about it. And if you're committed to it, then little Billy or little Susie's they've got to step forward and they've got to own this process. Now I say all that I've got some parents that try to do everything for their kid. And I will just tell you, I think that's a big mistake. I think you're setting your kids up for failure, because at some point, like, where's the responsibility fall? Like, you know, they're just going to not ever have done anything here. And, you know, then it's not, then you're making the decision, or you're prioritizing schools, or you're doing I mean, like, at some point, like, is it your dream or is it their dream? And if it's their dream and they want to do it, then I think they should take some ownership. Now, for the young ones, you know, up until probably the end of their sophomore year, it may be a little overwhelming, okay? But as they get into, you know, if they can drive a car, by golly, they can send an email out, okay? So I think you get to a point where you get to about, you know, the end of your sophomore, end of your junior year, then they need to be taking a good chunk of that responsibility, in my opinion. But you're going to have to coach them. You're not going to not coach them, but you're going to have to put the accountability, in my opinion. You're going to put a good chunk of that. But those things that, even with the parents that I work with, and I'll show you what that looks like here in just a little bit, where I'll say, hey, Mom, I need you to do this. Dad, I want you to do this. And Billy, I need you to do this. And I think that's okay, right? We can divide some of the workload up, especially coming out of the gate. It can get a little overwhelming, but you need them to take some ownership in it.
Thank you.
Sorry if I pontificated a little bit there on that one.
No, I mean, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey, Brian, can you talk about, sorry.
Todd, you clearly married up, buddy. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I know. Talk a little bit about, there's kind of two things similar to that, but how do you know the difference between an email coming from a school that's just trying to get you to come to their camp versus a recruiting email that they're really are? An email between they saw you at a tournament, come to our camp, versus, hey, Brian, we really like you. Let's talk about the school a little bit. So when you get the blanket, what are those different emails that we're all getting from coaches across the country?
Yeah, so I'm going to read one to you. It's just funny. So, like, I had one of my guys get a note from Oklahoma State, not an email, but he got a direct message, and it's like, this is when it's recruiting. When it's pretty formal and, like, you know, dear Todd, you know, we've noticed you as a prospect and we'd like that's pretty formal, right? It feels pretty formal. Here's what Oklahoma State put. Hey, what's up, man? Question mark. Okay. Now, do you see the difference, right? Very, very casual. They're trying to get to know the kid, you know, that kind of thing. You know, I'll give you another one. This is from Texas Tech to the same kid. This is how they start. They follow him on Twitter, and they literally said, hey, what's up, big time? Okay. So listen, they're going to contact you through social media. They're not going to email you. Email to kids is formal. ask Ray, or she's in here. Email's formal, isn't it? Like that feels very formal to you, right, Ray? Okay, that's like super formal to a high school kid. To you and I, we grew up where email's like whatever. It's like a text message to us. Okay, they're not going to recruit via email that way. They're going to recruit you to their camp to make the $300 to pay the GAs, and that's awesome. Like I was in that space, so I know the model very, very well. They're going to recruit off social media, guys. They're going to recruit primarily. Twitter's the one in a lot of sports, but even Instagram or Snapchat, they'll contact them through that if they're really recruiting you. Now, if they're doing just general awareness and general camp invites, that may come via email. But if they're active, they're gonna do it off a direct message, and then they're gonna start texting them. Questions, guys? Those are two good ones, though. But do you see the difference, Todd? Pretty big difference.
Yeah, definitely.
And those are real life examples. Like I'm literally reading. I mean, the parents are screenshotting the direct message from the college coaches. So I mean, that's legit. I wasn't making that up.
Frank, can you spend a couple of minutes talking about the change coming up next year, name and likeness, et cetera?
Yeah, I'll touch on it briefly, Tim, although I don't know that this audience will care a whole lot. You know, starting in the summer of 21, the NCAA, starting in the summer of 2021, there'll be new legislation that will be in place that you can basically monetize your personal brand. They're not going to pay you as a student athlete because they don't have a union, or there's a bunch of legal rules around that from a payment standpoint, but they're going to let you monetize your own brand. So if you're an athlete that's got an opportunity to get some social exposure or represent a local firm, or monetize your social brand or whatnot, there are going to be a number of things that are going to come about. You're starting to see schools right now formulate partnerships with companies in the social space that are helping put a market value around social impressions. So if any of you guys are following news, there's two companies that primarily do that on the social piece. That's just a little piece of the overall puzzle. But as you think about, if you're in college and you want to have a business, or you want to, build furniture, or monetize your Twitch channel. Some of you guys don't even know what Twitch is, but like things like that, you're now going to have the opportunity to legally do that. Before next June, you've never had the opportunity to do that. So there's a whole new marketplace that's going to open up for student athletes, and that'll be part of the decision-making criteria that will be, I think, part of recruiting moving forward. You're already starting to see where schools are now saying, hey, we have this many social followers, we have this business department, we have this entrepreneurial thing that we're going to build, and so you should come to our school because, if you're a women's softball player, we can help you make more money at, I'm going to pick on Emma here, you can make more money at the University of Oklahoma as a female softball player than you can Florida. And I'm just picking on her because she was a manager at Florida softball, so I'm just picking on Emma here. But that's an example of where they're going to have a marketplace where they can show that. So as a parent, that'll be part of the equation moving forward. But until the legislation's baked, I don't want to spend a whole bunch of time on that tonight, Tim. But hopefully that gives people a little bit of visibility to, in the future, once you're recruited, you're going to have a different decision to make in about a year from now. So just giddy up for that.
Thanks.
Hey, Brian, as far as the social media, like I'm a baseball player, what they'll do is, post what they've done, or if one of the tournaments does something, the highlights, they'll retweet it. But is there another way that you suggest them getting their name out there more prominent through social media?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially in baseball, you need to have a YouTube channel, and anything that you're doing that's practice oriented, you need to be having a bank of that. If he's in the batting cage, they want to see, swing. If he's a pitcher, they want to see, all of his pitches. If he's a positional player, maybe that's him, working on ground balls or, arm strength. So I would just say, have a YouTube channel that has a variety of different options. And this goes for every sport, guys. Outside of really, even football, we used it this summer because we didn't have camps. But I would just tell you, have a bank of assets that are outside of your game instruction and, populate that. And then if a coach asks you, hey, I'd really like to see you doing X, or, Reagan, could you do this drill for me? Then you've got a place to put it. And, by the way, you've got a whole bunch of other stuff there. So I always say YouTube it's a free, number one, but just a great asset to build a bank of assets that you could use for whatever reason. So that would be one that I would say. The other thing on social media is just listen. No negative stuff, no curse words, no controversial topics on any political thing right now or of any kind. Just stay away from it. Twitter should be a business tool for recruiting right now, and so I just as passionate as you are about a specific topic, one way or the other, just stay away from it right now. I wouldn't even go there, because literally the schools can then go in and they'll look at every like that you have on social media. They'll go to every person that you're following on social media. They'll do a profile of every one of the recruited kids that they're offering. So it's not about, I don't post anything questionable. Well, but who do you follow? Do you follow all sorts of nasty stuff? Do you like a bunch of, naughty pictures or curse word song lyrics or whatnot? Guys, they're fully inspecting you. So I just say examine what you're doing there and make sure that if you wouldn't watch it with your grandma over your shoulder, or you wouldn't like it with your mama with you, then you shouldn't be doing it on social media. And parents, if you're not on Twitter or don't know how YouTube works, or you don't have access to your kid's profile, shame on you. Shame on you. You should have it right now. Get off this call and have the conversation. And if worst case, if you don't want to be on there, then you should have carte blanche to access your kid's social profile whenever you need to, because that's how they're going to be communicating when it comes to recruiting. So if you're really comfortable with and I'm going to pick on Brian because he's one of my best friends. I'm going to pick on him for a minute here. If Brian's really comfortable with a 50-year-old man having social conversations, even though it's recruiting, with his daughter without him knowing about it, shame on him. Shame on him. He should know that. He should know what the conversations are like. He maybe doesn't need to have access to everything, but he should know what's going on. He should be able to have that dialogue. And so that'd be the way I'd answer it, Rod. Hopefully that maybe goes a little farther than what you were asking, but hopefully it gives you some ideas. And sorry, Brian, for picking on you, but I think you would agree with me. You're mute.
Oh, Larry.
You're still.
I appreciate it.
Yep. Okay. What other questions, guys? We're at the top of the hour. What other questions?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. You're double muted.
I was just going to say, along those lines, Kat and I watched that documentary, Social Dilemma, the other night, and it's completely changed my perspective on social media. And I know you're friends with me on social media. You can see probably that you haven't seen much from me lately, but I would encourage everybody to watch that. It's pretty eye-opening.
Yep. Okay. I agree. I don't know what it is, but I agree with it. Sure, it's awesome. All right. What other questions, guys, do we have?
Hey, Brian, one more on my end. What, say, baseball tournament in San Antonio, and there's going to be 50 coaches there, and what kind of communication should a pitcher send in or a player send in, even soccer, whatever it is, to a coach that they know is going to be at that tournament? To your point, there's 22 fields. How do they get that coach's attention?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be letting them know when you're going to play, what team you're on, what position you plan to play that week. If you're, because in baseball you could move around a little bit, right? So, hey, planning to play third, or I might play third and short, or I might play third and pitch. And planning to play third this game. I'm going to pitch game 2. If you know, whatever you know in advance, and I know sometimes that's hard, but I just say be proactive with it. At minimum, your schedule and your jersey number and the jersey colors, right? Make it really simple for these guys, because don't assume that they've ever seen your team play. They know anything about you. Don't assume they have your club coach's cell phone number. Don't assume they've got your phone number or mom and dad's number, man. Make it prescriptive with these coaches. So if they're one of your target schools, let them know. Even if they can't respond to you. So like Reagan there, she's a sophomore, right, Brian? Yeah. So they can't contact her right now. That doesn't mean I don't want her emailing them. She should be emailing them every tournament she plays where there's college coaches either virtually watching or they're in person. She should let them know in advance. Because if she doesn't, then why are we playing the game? I mean, other than having fun with your friends and all that stuff. But, like, tell them you're playing. Let them know about you. Include any other, if we've got that bank of film that we talked about, put a little bit of that on there, right? So that maybe they watch you play a game, but maybe they want to go back and see you with some of the instruction stuff that you're doing out of the cages or whatnot. So just be proactive with them and let them know, because what you want them to do ultimately is, oh, okay, I remember that 2:00 on Saturday, field 4. There's this kid from Dallas that, kind of interesting, and he's a high academic kid, or whatever it is that distinguishes you. I think I'm going to go take a look at that kid. I heard some good things about the club team that he's on, or the high school team that he's on, or, I need a center midfielder, or whatever it is, right? You want them to plan their schedule around your kid. Now, it doesn't always work that way, but if you can get them to at least think about it, be proactive, think a little differently about how they're organizing some stuff. And worst case is all you did was send a couple of emails. Let's just say that nothing happened out of it, Todd. Like, what did you lose? A, it was free. There's a little bit of time to send some stuff in advance. But what if it does help you? What if it's that one coach that comes and watches you because you sent 10 emails out? What if that makes the difference? So I always just encourage people, be proactive about your schedule, and don't assume that they're just going to magically find you. Okay. Does that help, Todd? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Okay, good. All right. So very good. I'm going to stop my video real quick, and I'm going to share, and I'm just doing that to kind of provide some bandwidth to the interwebs today. Listen, I'm going to end on this. This is not a sales pitch, but some of you guys have asked for what do we do and how do we work with different people. And, I'm not a recruiting service. I do this because I love families. I love helping kids. And I really kind of treat this as like concierge medicine or a CPA or an attorney. I'm just really your advisor. I'm on call if you need it, 24/7, 365. I usually tell my guys, don't text me after about 10:30 because I turn into a pumpkin. But other than that, I'm usually on call before they even get up. But for each of our families that we work with, and we've got multiple sports now, each of them will do a 90-minute in-person session or virtual session, depending on where you're at. And we'll go through the recruiting strategy. We'll give you an evaluation of where we think you can play, or we'll counsel with trusted experts in the sport that you play to help them understand where you can play. The next piece is that, we've got a whole process behind how we do national recruiting and regional recruiting, depending on the evaluation that you get. And we'll go through that with each of you. We've got a pretty tried and true process behind how we do that. We give each family a private portal to communicate with me. It's private for just the family and me to ask questions, to send notes and questionnaires, kind of like the stuff that guys were asking about. How do people, what's the social conversation look like? I have kids all the time will say, how to respond to this coach? What does this mean? What's a preferred walk-on mean, et cetera, et cetera. We'll give you a license to a CRM system and an email and search system through Productive Recruit, one of our partners. I've got all sorts of templates that I give for email, resumes. I review all of the highlight videos that go out to coaches. I review all that before they get sent. I go through camp strategy, where to go for camp, what not to go to based on your evaluation, and then all of the social media strategy. And we do all of that for as well as, you know, in many sports, I'm reviewing coaching changes. We're talking about unofficial visits, how to make an official visit, what to, you know, get out of each of those visits, how to set those up. And then ultimately we get into comparing scholarship amounts and pros and cons and how to make a decision on a commitment and so forth. Year one fee is $1,500 per family. And then if you renew, which is an option, you know, again, if you're like a sophomore or junior, then it's a $500 renewal fee for the subsequent year. So that's it. I'm not going to give a sales pitch here. I don't mean this to be. I really wanted the genuinely guys to understand what we're doing here and get a little bit of feedback from a recruiting standpoint. So hopefully that helps you guys, gives you a little bit of sense of, you know, the do's and don'ts for recruiting and how we work. And if you've got questions, this is my cell phone number. You can shoot me a text after this or tomorrow. That's actually, there's a typo, so let me put my cell phone number. I can't even put my own number on this slide. If you've got questions, you can shoot me a text. Now that you actually can text me, because there's an actual 10-digit number on there. And then my email's on here as well, or you can follow me on Twitter and you can send me a direct message that way. So guys, feel free to engage if you got questions. If I can help you with any of the things that I covered tonight, I'd be happy to do that. And if you're interested in what we provide, then great. And if not, then listen, there's ways to attack the recruiting process on your own for free. And you just got to be really organized and really level-headed about the process. So it can feel daunting and maybe a little bit overwhelming. Hopefully tonight you got a little bit better feel for maybe the do's and don'ts and maybe where to start. And so let me pause here one more time, answer any remaining questions that anybody might have, and then I'll give you back the rest of your evening. So any questions, guys? Todd, I know you had a bunch of families from your team. Did this help maybe touch on some things that have been talked about at your team's level?
Yeah, I think personally it's great, and it's great surface info, and they know where to go if they go deeper. And I don't know, Rod, if you have any thoughts tied to that for your team.
Yeah, no, I thought it was real good. I had a couple that couldn't make it, and they just couldn't figure it out. But it's you know, we're 2023 graduates, but it's really something that is kind of eye-opening to myself as well, of what we need to be preparing for, as opposed to us just going to showcases as a coach. Just now making sure these kids are making their emails and, you know, making their YouTube videos. While we were on this, I texted a friend about getting a GoPro so we can start recording these games for all these kids. So yeah, the insight was amazing. It was a big eye opener, especially with having a sophomore myself. So yeah, it was awesome, and I really appreciate your time.
Good, no problem. Glad to do it. Hopefully it helps. Sorry, Brian and Ray, you got to hear this twice, but hopefully maybe a little bit more of it digested this time than maybe back in January. So always great to see you and have you here. And but guys, if there's any other questions, shoot me a text or shoot me an email tomorrow or tonight, and I'm gonna go grab some cold lasagna downstairs. But if you guys have questions or need anything from me, feel free. You're now part of my mailing list, so you'll see updates that'll come from me periodically moving forward. But again, if there's something else that you need more specifically, or and then also, you know, Rod, you guys, we have models where we can provide this at the team level as well. So, you know, if that's something that you want to explore at the team level, we can do that as well. So anyways, you guys have a great night, and be safe and healthy and blessed, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks again for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.